Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again. This is RightCast Radio. I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me is the founder of RightChan,
Jadis,
and our two panelists?
commentators? Who knows?
I don't know.
We just ring our bells.
They show up at our house when we give them coffee and
Yeah.
they stay. So, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Coffee pot.
And,
Cobra.
all right. And today we're talking about Syria,
More specifically, the refugees from Syria.
the scourge of the Middle East.
Those people?
Yeah, loosely.
Humans. People.
Yeah.
Persons. Individuals.
Kind of like whales, the vermin of the sea.
Narwhals. Anyway.
I think me and him are the only ones that have actually watched the Tony Hawk Pro Skater credits.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. But,
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. What's the agenda? Is there an agenda? Not from the powers that be. I'm talking about specifically from the Syrians themselves. What's the agenda? Is there an agenda? And how do we stop them from raping our women and killing our children?
So, for those who don't know, a little bit of background on the refugee crisis in Europe right now. It started back in 2014, roughly, when the civil war in Syria really started kind of hitting a fever pitch. Around this same period of time, you had a lot of stuff going on in Libya with the Islamic State, and their off and on revolutions. And this was all right on the heels of the Arab Spring, which really came to a head. I think in Egypt, was it
Tehran?
No, there's a square. It's like Tahrir Square or something.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact name of it, but
You got it right.
But it's so when the civil war really started kicking off in Syria and things got pretty bad, you started seeing huge millions and millions of refugees coming into Europe from the Middle East, mostly from Syria, northern Iraq, some Kurds, and there's been some like Afghans come in as well because the Afghan conflict is still more or less ongoing, and it's kind of worrisome because right now something like more than 60% of the supposed refugees are men between the ages of 18 and 34. These are fighting age men, and it's causing a bit of a demographic shift in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
You look at places like Malmo in Sweden, where the populations are now in excess of 50% Middle Eastern, in cities that used to be entirely European. You're starting to see no-go zones in Great Britain and France and in Germany and in Sweden, where there are so many of these Middle Easterners, and to a lesser degree, North Africans and Sub-Saharan Africans who are coming in and building cultural and religious enclaves, mostly Islamic, in what were previously ethnically homogenous European cities, or more or less homogenous. And it's starting to cause a bit of a shift in the local culture. Any of you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, your perspective on the whole thing?
It's a fucking tragedy. It's the leaders of these nations need to be fucking horsewhipped. These Syrian invaders, I refuse to call them refugees. They're not.
They're really not.
These invaders, they're coming in. They're raping our women. They're doing heinous acts of violence against innocent bystanders.
3,600 children raped in Britain in the Rotherham incident.
You have that. You have just the malicious acts of violence. There have been videos they showed where people would be standing in train stations, minding their own business, and like these sick bastards will show up and they'll just kick them and beat them, push them down flights of stairs.
There have been hatchet attacks in Germany, and Germany never had violence like that before this.
No, and I don't know. I blame the men primarily in these random countries because as much as the leaders of these countries need to be, well, frankly, in my personal opinion, they need to be driven out of the country on with flaming torches, pitchforks, and whips. They need to be like Merkel needs to be whipped, stripped naked, and whipped to the border, and then whipped until she runs into the sea.
Yeah, Merkel. Merkel, honestly, and this is probably going to rub some people wrong. I think Merkel has probably done more damage to Germany than probably even Hitler did.
Well, Adolf Hitler didn't do that much damage to Germany.
He did a lot of damage in like Eastern Europe, but
Yeah.
Germany was largely fine until we bombed the shit out of it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, if you're looking specifically at what individuals did to a country, Adolf Hitler didn't really do anything to Germany. As a matter of fact, in his mind, he was trying to save the German people, and it was the Allies and the Soviets and all that. They're the ones that did stuff to Germany, but Adolf Hitler didn't really do anything to the ethnic Germans. However, Merkel, as far as someone who's actively done things to their country, Merkel, I think, I've never, in Germany specifically, no leader has ever shit on their own people as much as Merkel has. Sweden is a good secondary, but as far as Germany goes, Merkel is the only one I know of.
Now, to be totally fair, Merkel thinks that she's doing good for Germany.
Does she, though? Does she?
I don't think she does.
I mean, that's the thing.
Leftists, globalists, cultural Marxists honestly believe that diversity is good for people.
I mean, on the lower levels, I agree with you. Like, when you get to, okay, let's take a lot of college students, I think they legitimately, when they talk about, oh, we're going out to punch Nazis, I think they legitimately believe, yeah, we're going out to go punch a bunch of racist Nazis. That's not true.
They end up beating up trash cans for 3 hours.
That's not necessarily true, but, they tend to think that way. I wonder, though, when you get up into the higher levels of government, if they don't realize what's going on, and if they're maybe saying, okay, I want to stay in this position of power, so therefore they're maneuvering things, and they're doing whatever they have to do in order to whip, their subservience. The thing I do kind of wonder about, though, is like, okay, you bring in all these refugees, isn't that going to bite you in the butt, though?
Well, and that's why I believe that a lot of these children of the 60s who were themselves introduced to cultural Marxism, things like that, through university, I believe them to be true believers, because if Merkel was just trying to hold and maintain power, why would she be intentionally shifting her demographic to a demographic that does not believe in female leadership?
I'll tell you why. Because it has nothing to do with the voter base. The power doesn't go from the bottom up like it's supposed to. It goes from the top down.
Right.
So let's say Merkel plays by the rules. Somebody's pulling her strings. Somebody's her puppet master. She's not the one doing this unilaterally. So let's say that she completely ruins Germany. Germany's 75% Arab now.
Yeah.
And she gets voted out of office. She doesn't fucking care, because now she pleased the puppet master who's pulling her strings, and now she'll be whisked away to some cushy job somewhere else. She doesn't care
To do the same thing.
And like, this isn't conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact. Look at the recent French elections. The guy that won was in the Rothschilds' pocket, and that's very clearly in their pocket. He walked into a senior position at the bank that the Rothschilds owned. After he got out of that position, he said, I'm going to go into politics. Went into politics, and he has no experience in politics.
Right.
He bought the position. He bought his way in.
Hardly anybody even knew who Macron was before this election. Like,
So-
he'd been a minor official, I think, in one of the prior administrations.
Right.
I forget whether it was Hollande or Sarkozy. I want to say it was Hollande. He was a minor official in Hollande's.
Right, but that's not a political background.
That's
You did a thing once.
That's like being an intern. That's like being an intern at Congress.
That and Hollande had like freaking lower approval ratings than Trump currently does.
Yeah.
Hollande is actually the least approved of president in French history.
So being a minor official in the administration of the most reviled leader does not qualify you to win the next election.
So there's a puppet master pulling strings, and that's why. And that's why I say these people need to be horsewhipped into the ocean, because this shit that's going on is not good for anyone. And the funny thing I think is going to happen, you're seeing the people that are pulling the strings, they aren't immune to this. This is going to come to... It's going to hit them last,
Oh, yeah.
but it will hit them. If we can't stop this, these idiots are going to destroy themselves as well. They just don't realize it yet.
Since we're going down this rabbit trail and talking about higher ups, kind of pulling the strings and all that, I halfway wonder when you get into and you start to look around and you start to look at the bankers and like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all that, you wonder, okay. Because I truly believe they're trying to use Islam, namely the ideology, in order to destroy Western culture, destroy Western virility. But they're going to have that same problem with Islam. I kind of wonder what their plan is, because you look. I know down in Georgia, there's the Georgia Guidestones that's maintained by the Masonic Lodge down there, and it's basically 10 Commandments for a New World Order. This exists. You can go down there right now, drive to it, and actually look at it.
And read it in basically any language you can think of.
Right, there's I think every living language, and...
It's like 16 or so living languages.
It's
all the major ones.
Yeah, anyway, you can look at it, you can read it, and one of the commandments is to maintain the population under 500 million, and to maintain them in an agrarian, serf-type society. And you wonder, how do you expect to do that with Islam? Because you're talking about an explosive and a very violent mentality and a very violent belief system. It's going to be the same problem for them that,
I can tell you exactly how they'll do it.
What's that?
They'll threaten Mecca. How do you control somebody? How do you control somebody that's so violently religious in their beliefs that they... that they're unstoppable in any other way? You threaten the one thing they hold more sacred than their own families and their own lives.
Right.
Mecca.
Right.
You point a nuke at Mecca and say, calm the fuck down, or Mecca gets it.
Yeah.
And that will curb a lot of this bullshit.
Right.
That's the only thing I could think of, because you have a point. That's...
Right.
The European countries, not the people, European countries have a long history of turning the Middle East into their attack dogs. It started with the British Empire, and the more I study history, the more I hate the British Empire.
Yeah.
The British Empire, I think, is probably the most evil organization that has ever... And if you start to study it, the British Empire was largely responsible for World War II.
Right.
Not Hitler.
Right.
The British Empire was indirectly responsible for the Holocaust.
Right.
They were also responsible for World War I, and they were responsible for all the current uprising in the Middle East.
Right.
If anybody's seen Lawrence of Arabia, that's where this shit started.
Right.
The Middle East has always been a little. I don't want to say backwards, but they have their own way of doing things. They weren't backwards. They had culture. And
the problem with the Middle East is Islam. When you take the thing is, Islam is a culture destroyer. Everything Islam touches, it shatters it. It destroys it because. Okay, case in point. Let's take. I think Chadis and I were talking about. I think there was. You said there was a big statue of Buddha up in the
in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Afghanistan
was a Buddhist country at one point.
Yeah, and that they actually just blew it up because it's not the one true God.
Yeah, this was during the Afghan Civil War in the 70s and 80s.
Right. This is a historical artifact we're talking about. So Islam is very cancerous. It's very destructive.
Well, actually,
also, in its it's very oppressive in the way it treats men and women, and as such, and you get to that point, and that's.
So here's my what I was getting to with that. Yeah. So that's actually fairly recent. Islam being this destructive, cancerous force. That's a fairly recent occurrence.
Okay.
Islam has always been a warring faction, but so is Christianity.
Right.
And I don't mean that in that's ooga booga, they're going to come get you.
Yeah,
what I mean is,
we used to fight for our
ideals. Exactly.
Yeah.
So what you have is, you look at the Ottoman Empire, you look at the Turks, and that's when it really started, because that's when Lawrence of Arabia, the story was penned, and that was where the destabilization began. You had a powerful empire that had successfully brought together all of these peoples that had never been brought together before, and it was doing extremely well for itself.
Right.
The Ottoman Empire fell, and now all these warring factions are coming in. Then you start seeing the Sunni and the Shia becoming more and more aggressive, and the Sunni tend to be the more aggressive of the two, much more. Matter of fact, Shias don't usually do anything.
I think it's as far as Islamic terrorism goes, it's 90% of Islamic terrorism is committed by Sunnis.
Yeah.
You look at as far as the Shia go, there are really only two big Shia terrorist groups. There's Hezbollah, whose sole focus is putting essentially military pressure on Israel.
Yeah.
And they're not even really a terrorist organization. They're actually a government organization of Iran.
Yeah.
And I forget what the other one is, but they're in line with Hezbollah. They're actually connected in some way. But they are single target, and they are largely retaliatory. Mm-hmm. They will strike in response to things. They are not proactive.
Yeah.
The Israelis will do something, maybe something minor, maybe something major.
Yeah, something that they don't like.
Yeah, and they will respond in kind.
Right.
Hezbollah doesn't car bomb people. Hezbollah doesn't really employ suicide bombers all that much.
Yeah, Hezbollah is more of an organized military.
Yeah, they're actually they are a paramilitary branch of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Right.
So what you get with this is you see mostly England, but Europe turning the Middle East into their attack dogs, and it came back to bite them in the ass. And England really has a huge role playing. Every single time some major disaster has happened socioeconomically, England is always behind it.
Right.
Every time. They destroyed India.
It's the eternal Anglo.
Well, England destroyed India. They destroyed the Middle East. They caused 2 world wars. And, now it's just really convenient for them to point the finger and be like, oh, no, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
It somehow all gets blamed on Germany.
Huh?
Somehow all gets blamed on Germany.
Yeah, both times,
World
actually.
War I was really interesting. So you often hear that Gavrilo Princip, a Serb, shot the Archduke.
Mm-hmm.
Gavrilo Princip wasn't a Serb. He was a Bosnian Muslim.
Huh. Didn't know that.
Yeah,
All right.
Gavrilo Princip was a Bosnian Muslim who shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Hmm.
And then somehow... So Austria responds to this. Russia goes, okay, well, Austria's going to fuck up Serbia now.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia gets dragged in on Serbia's side, which drags in the French, which drags in the English, which then drags in the Germans, because the Germans just don't like anybody.
Well,
Germany didn't start this war.
no, Germany didn't want the war either.
Yeah.
So I've been doing some studies on World War I and II, because the two are far more connected than most people realize.
Oh, yeah.
And,
World War II doesn't happen without the Treaty of Versailles.
and that's the thing. So World War I kind of happened because England was threatened by Germany, because Germany was becoming a bigger world power than them,
Yeah.
and it was quickly on the road to becoming the greatest world power. And England wasn't having that, so their only way of stopping it was to pretty much create faux outrage
Yeah.
about the assassination and push this into happening. And
That and the whole remember Belgium thing. Like,
right.
there has never been any evidence of war crimes committed in Belgium.
Well, so on that, there were some things that were iffy. Like, the Germans would, for instance, take a lot of prisoners and then execute them. But every country does that in every war that's ever been fought. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What was happening is the British were distributing stories of Germans, like, bayoneting children and cutting off people's hands.
Yeah.
And no evidence of that has ever surfaced.
Which is actually seems very trying to think of terms. Not an efficient way of doing things.
No, it's really
Well, and the whole idea is anti-German.
They were trying
like,
to create a narrative of German barbarism that simply wasn't true.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a large thing that I see in a German culture and how it relates to the way they view this, like the refugee crisis. I was watching I think a video last night where I think it was at a music festival in one of their major cities, where a girl was actually talking about and giving details about how she was essentially molested by like 5 or 6 guys. And you look at that and you wonder, why is this happening? Why are people allowing this to happen? And there's such a mentality of bad Germany for causing World War I.
you did the Holocaust.
Yeah, you did the Holocaust.
You need to have your
Stuff
kids
like
raped.
stuff like that. And then not only that, but it also extends into I think other parts of Europe where you get into case in point, the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
There's always this level of demonization of just white people in general, and I don't mean to be that guy, but you get into that where there's this demonization of white people in general, and it's like, oh, well, you deserve to be punished. Why? Because so me as an American male who has half my heritage is from the northern United States, the other half is from the southern United States. Okay, and
What? Go ahead, Falcon.
okay. You take me as an American man, where half my heritage is from northern United States, half my heritage is from the southern United States. So there's this idea of, oh, well, you need to pay, or you need to pay black people back because your great 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 grandfather was a slave owner. I wasn't a slave owner. I don't condone slavery. I think it was horrible that it happened. It happened. Yeah, I look back at history, realize it happened. But there's this idea that, oh, you're guilty because I guess guilt by association in a way. And it's part of what really ticks me off because, and I truly believe that, and I do believe that races are a sacred thing. And I think that it's a sacred thing created by God, and that no race, I don't think, can stomp on the rights on the rights of another. However, that also applies for us too.
Yeah.
That applies for everyone.
Yeah, everybody wants to talk about the slave trade in the Americas, but nobody says shit about the Arab slave trade that stopped in 1998.
Right, well, because it doesn't fit the narrative.
It's still ongoing.
Oh, yeah, it's still going. It officially stopped in 98, but there's still slave markets in Saudi Arabia.
Because it doesn't fit the narrative.
No, not even Saudi Arabia. You go to Libya now.
Really?
In Tripoli right now, you can go to any major market, and they have literal auction blocks where they are selling black African slaves openly because we went and bombed them. We helped overthrow their government. Now there's no government.
Right.
And so they've reverted back to that old tribal mindset. And it kind of ties into something interesting about a weird feature of Islam. I actually wrote an article about this on RightCast.org. Islam is unlike other religions. In that, or let me back up there. Islam is fundamentally an ethnic religion. It is the religion of the Arab people.
Right.
Its roots are fundamentally in a combination of a heretical Christian sect called the Nestorians, kind of a 5th century Talmudic Judaism. With a huge background in pre-Islamic Arab polytheism. And it draws from all of those sources. But the thing that really shines through in Islam is that Arab mindset. My theory is that Islam fundamentally is the religious expression of Arab racial supremacism. Because if you look at any place Islam is spread to, they have the same culture as every other place Islam is. Indonesia looks like Saudi Arabia, looks like Egypt, looks like Kuwait. They eat the same food. They speak similar. Arabic becomes one of the primary linguistic vehicles of communication. They celebrate the same holidays. Islam consumes, and Coffee Pot mentioned this earlier. Islam destroys, deconstructs, and then rebuilds culture in its own image. And that isn't healthy.
Right.
When you can't strip a people of their culture.
Because as soon as you do that,
and you can't do that and expect them to behave the way those people normally would.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties back into what's going on in Europe right now with the refugees. Your traditional European culture is being deconstructed. Emmanuel Macron, who was just elected in France, you can look it up. He has been quoted as saying, "There is no French culture." In Sweden, Ramadan is being pushed by the government as a Swedish tradition.
Yeah.
It's despicable. It's
Yeah.
fucking despicable.
Well, because
it's situations like
we're being
this.
replaced in our own home.
Well, it's situations like this that have me. I'll jump on the religion train quickly. It's things like this that make me say that we need to. There's two main forces fighting this. One is pagan heathenry and other forms of paganism, and the other one is traditional Christianity. We can sort our shit out later. We have bigger problems.
Yeah, we have bigger issues.
We have bigger problems. We can
Yeah.
we can bitch about whose gods are better later.
Yeah.
Well,
Right now, we need to survive.
Yeah.
We're all sons of the West, and we all need to band together right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree. And I think that's why that's why we have 4 different people with 4 very different worldviews in the same podcast, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And you get into that, and you look at a case in point. You look at what's going on with Europe, what's going on in Canada, where you have all these refugees coming in, and they're essentially trying to disrupt the culture. What is the antidote? How do we turn this around? How do we change it and start pushing it in the other way?
It's too late for Europe. Peaceful anyway. It's going to take blood.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be an armed rebellion to push them out at this point because they won't leave of their own free will.
No.
Right.
For the Americas, there's still a chance to do this politically.
Yeah.
Well, I got 2 points here. One in our undisclosed hometown. There was actually a vote before our council of city councils.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just know.
To the Senate for our hometown.
Yes.
The
Here.
city council. Yeah.
Yes.
The one we're currently in, is a while back. I think it was last year. It came before our city council whether or not we would take any refugees, because President Obama was going to send them here.
Right.
He said that our county had to take refugees.
Right.
I don't know why our county specifically.
Well,
But-
it's
The president said that our county had to take them, and our county commissioners met and voted unanimously not to take them.
well, yeah. I mean,
And
that's,
consequently, we don't have any.
right. And that's
This is sort of what we were talking about before with like localizing governmental power.
Mm-hmm.
We have taken steps towards that. I think there's going to be another debate over federal supremacy here
Oh
soon.
Lord, yeah. That's
Now, for Europe, it's interesting that you say it's going to require blood. However, it need not be our blood. When they demolished the Calais jungle, the refugee camp that had formed in the Calais region of England,
France.
I guess. Oh no,
It's northern France.
the fence was keeping them out of the English partition.
right.
They built a refugee camp around it. The French agreed to destroy the refugee camp. Well, the Muslim refugees there began to riot in protest of their shanty town being destroyed.
Right.
Within that, however, there was a population of Assyrians, and the Assyrians are an ethnic group mostly from northern Iraq that are majority Christian.
Yeah. Okay.
In response to the Syrian Muslim riot, the Assyrian Christians held a Catholic mass the morning of the demolition, and immediately after the mass began arming themselves with bats and counter-rioted and drove. They were outnumbered 10-1, the Assyrians being the smaller force.
Right.
And they drove the Muslims out of the shanty town so that the French government could bulldoze it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be European blood that saves Europe. We have allies in the region that are willing to fight.
Well, and you run into, because I think one of the things everyone must do is we must look at history and attempt to not repeat the same mistakes that history has made. When it comes to, I think when Ben Carson was actually running for president of the United States, one of his campaign deals that he actually went over to Syria, talked to Syrians over there, and what he found was that, he came back and was talking about was that most Syrians did not want to leave Syria. Now, if that mindset has changed or not because of the benefits they're receiving in Europe, I don't know. But could it be a system where, get out of Syria, stop messing with the regime, let them stabilize themselves, and then tell the Syrians, okay, go back.
Here's the thing, and I'm going to be very cruel. The situation in the world today has not allowed me to be polite.
Right.
I no longer have the privilege of being polite or being nice.
Okay.
I don't give a shit whether Syria is stable or not. I don't give a shit if they all die.
Right.
They're killing our people. They're raping our women. They're murdering our children. Fuck them and everything they're about. Drive them out. Drive them into the fucking sea if they won't go to Syria. Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit where they go, but they need to stay the fuck out of Mother Europa.
Right, well, but if there's I do feel if there's a peaceful alternative, we must at least explore that alternative before it comes to violence.
Peace is preferable because then we don't have to shed our blood.
There's one problem, however, with the peaceful solution of sending the Syrians back to Syrians.
Yeah,
and this is actually, I'm surprised none of us have mentioned it yet. The refugees we're getting that are coming through Syria aren't Syrians. They're Saudis. ISIS is formed almost entirely of Saudis, funded by Saudi Arabia to destabilize Saudi Arabia's rivals in the region.
At that point, it very much will take an armed resistance to get them out.
Yeah, we can't send the Saudis back to Syria because they were dispatched here for a reason.
So
and they won't leave until their mission is accomplished.
Well, I say, we open it up, and then if you refuse to leave, okay, we're forcing you out. And that at that point,
to the sea.
Yeah, at that point, absolutely. If they say no, we refuse, we're going to stay here, rape your women, rape your children, kill people, and impose Islam, then absolutely take up arms by all means.
Well, the thing is, though, I'm an ethno-nationalist. We've talked about this before.
Right.
I believe Syria is for Syrians.
I believe so too. Yeah. I mean, that's.
I think it would be unethical to send Saudis back to Syria.
Right.
I also don't give a shit. That's a big them problem.
Yeah.
The thing is, right now, is it's a big us problem. And why pawn the problem off on someone else when we could solve it now?
Because they're not our people.
Well, another thing is this problem would be easier. Just because they aren't our people, like, for instance, the Syrians as a whole are easy to deal with.
Right.
Like, Bashar al-Assad's actually a fairly sensible guy.
Oh, yeah.
He turned, his father, Hafez al-Assad, actually turned Syria from a strictly Islamic republic into a secular republic with actually very good, for instance, religious tolerance, equal rights for men and women. Like, it is, for all intents and purposes, a Western government in Syria.
Well,
but I think it would do us well, for instance, to, while we should certainly not put their needs over our own, and we should definitely look out for our own first, there's no reason to alienate them. Well, and if we can have them as an ally in the region, it would go a long way to keeping things like this from happening in the future.
Not only that, but
because
also
the way Islam functions, it is inherently expansionistic.
Yeah.
So if we push all the Saudis back, but we don't have allies in the region, they will come flooding back.
Right. Not only that, but also if by pawning off, let's say we sent all the Saudis to Syria. By pawning off that problem on someone else, are we not essentially just pushing off the problem somewhere else? And as Cheda just said, it ends up blowing up again. If we can solve, like you said, I'm literally just parroting everything here.
You said it right.
Yeah.
We don't need to send them back to Syria. We need to drive them into the sea.
Mm-hmm. And in that situation, it does us good to ally ourselves with, for instance, the Syrian government, because that's a wall the Saudis were pushing out can't cross.
Right. Yeah. And my biggest issue with it is I don't care where they go.
Yeah.
I enjoy the sea idea, but
yeah.
Like they're destroying us.
Yeah.
Our people are dying, and nobody fucking cares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even half of our people don't care.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's. I think they were interviewing. There was a couple of guys. I think it was through Prager University. They went to Sweden, and they interviewed both immigrants and also native Swedes. And the Swedes they were interviewing were everything's going on that's going on. Sweden has become the rape capital of the world, and the Swedes are still saying like, "Oh yeah, we need to bring them in, and they don't deserve to to suffer and all that good stuff." And
how do you wake them the fuck up?
Yeah, I mean,
how do you wake them up?
Well, and I hate to say this because anybody who knows me can tell you that I am a far cry from a fan of National Socialism.
Right.
I think it's a cartoonish ideology.
Yeah, I agree.
But unfortunately, we're getting to a point where they're necessary allies in this. Like I don't particularly want to ally with the Nordic resistance in Norway and Sweden.
Yeah.
But they're the only people over there who actually want to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend,
but he's an
but
ally.
I can sure as shit use him.
Yeah.
I'd rather fight by his side than have the enemy stab me in the back.
Well, at this point, it's beyond political ideologies.
Yeah.
This goes even with the religion. It's beyond religion. It's beyond political ideologies.
Right.
It's a fight for the survival of our race.
It is.
People
It's a fight for our very survival. I don't give a shit what your political preference is at this point. If you're willing to fight with us, then we can argue and bicker about this later when we're not in dire peril.
Well, and honestly, on the Western side, fundamentally, we all have enough in common that we can peacefully work out our issues.
Yeah.
We can sit down and reason with each other.
Yeah.
But the people coming in are wholly alien in the way they think.
Yep.
We can't reason with them. We don't have common ground with them.
Well, because you're arguing with an ideology, and ideologies can't be bartered, they can't be compromised with, they can't.
Run this by you because looking at this is getting into how open the borders on the United States are, both our northern and southern border. Right now, Canada is flooding in refugees by the thousands. Trudeau has basically said, we're welcoming them in and all that good stuff. Canada is a very large, very unprotected border. That is right,
and they will come in eventually.
Oh yeah, so. What would be our response to that?
I'm actually not worried about that as much as I am Europe, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I know for a fucking fact they're not going to come to the South, because if they do and they try to start their dumb shit down here, that's going to be a problem that gets solved real fast. They're going to take a long walk. They're going to take a long walk off a short limb and hit a short rope.
Oh, I mean, there's rednecks in every state. I mean, let's be honest here. Yeah.
That's why I'm not super concerned about that.
The problem is that it sneaks up on them. It sneaks up on communities.
Right.
Down in South Carolina, there is a town literally called Holy Islamville, and it's a Wahhabi enclave.
Yeah.
It is a walled compound city.
Yeah.
That is entirely Muslim. It's actually funded by, I believe, it's a Pakistani Islamic group that actually has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
And the only reason they haven't been raided yet is because they keep their heads down.
Yeah. Also in Michigan, there's a couple of places.
Dearborn.
Dearborn,
Michigan is actually considered a holy city.
Right, and what ends up happening is they wait until they're big enough to cause an issue.
Of course, and I'm aware of that. But when that happens, this isn't going to be a repeat of Sweden.
Yeah,
No.
It'll be bloody, it will be a civil war, but it will happen.
Oh yeah, well, and you take the average American that's. I think most of us. I'm not sure what the rate is, and I know it varies from state to state. But there's a good portion of us that carry firearms all the time. That carry. If we're not carrying that, we've got a knife of some sort. Down where we live, it's not uncommon to see a guy with a 4-inch belt knife for crying out loud.
Yeah. Or a pistol.
Yeah, open carry pistol. Yeah, I mean that's
common shit.
Yeah, it's common.
Thank you, Lord Jesus, for letting me live in an open carry state.
Right. But so I do think that let's take Alabama. I know my mother was actually telling us about a story down there about, I think it was couple of our great uncles or something, and our great aunt was raped by a guy. Well, the sheriff took the two of our great uncles to the guy that raped our great aunt, let him out the car, turned around so he could say, I didn't see anything, and allowed those guys to beat the tar out of that other guy. I mean, that's that idea of...
That's Southern justice.
Yeah, it's that idea of
That's
Southern justice.
And also, I think more vigilante justice would go a long way to restoring a certain amount of order.
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps, and we can discuss that later, I think. But
that falls into like stuff like honor codes that could be an entire pod by itself.
Right. The problem with the Syrian issue is, or Saudi Arabian, or wherever they're really from, it's.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just call them what they are. They're jihadis.
Yeah.
This is not a migration. These are not refugees.
No, this is an invasion.
This is jihad.
War. Yeah.
They are. It's an age old tactic they use.
Well,
you move in, you lay low, just low enough to where people won't fight you, and then you start breeding. You build enclaves and you spread.
Yep.
That is how Islam has always functioned.
Yep.
It functions exactly like a virus or a cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to cut it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
It needs to be excised and it needs to be burned.
Yeah.
So the real question becomes, how do you
fight that ideology?
Well, it's not that the literal governments in like Sweden and Germany and stuff are on the side of these jihadis. They're, there was a discussion I was listening on a podcast that I listen to frequently.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gentleman that made the statement on Facebook, I think, that said like, it said that we won't be safe until all of the Muslims are driven out of the country, which is a fairly severe statement,
Right.
But
Not,
now he's facing 2 years in prison for hate speech.
Right. It's not.
That's
It's a
insane.
severe statement, but it's not worthy of jail time for crying out loud.
Right.
Let's be honest here.
But now he's on trial for hate speech, and he could be facing 2 years in a federal.
Well, there's in Germany.
In Sweden.
In Germany, there was a hatchet attack. A Muslim man was attacking people. It was either a hatchet or a machete.
Yeah.
And while this guy was doing this, a German man poked out the window of his apartment and threw a beer bottle at the attacker. He was arrested and is being charged for assault because he threw a beer bottle at a man who was killing people.
It's like I can't wrap my head around this shit. Like, it doesn't
Right.
seem real. Like, this
Well,
doesn't seem like
it's-
something that should actually be happening.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a fantasy.
Out of a really terrible book.
Yeah.
Like, you look at that shit and you're like, no, people won't actually do that shit,
Yeah,
but it's happening.
1984 discount edition.
Right, like, it's not even something you would see in 1984. 1984, for as foreshadowing as it was, it made sense.
Yeah.
This shit doesn't make sense.
No. And that
Well, there's one ray of hope. The governments may be on the side of the cultural Marxists who are tacitly endorsing the slaughter of our own people. But our people are awakening to this.
Yeah.
It's actually something like 55 to 60% of Swedes now are like, no, we need to get these people out.
Yeah, but is that
And
enough?
Well, that's only as these violent attacks continue,
It's only
that
gonna
number's only going to grow.
And those are only the people who are willing to speak in the affirmative. Many
Yeah.
more hold that opinion but won't say it out of fear.
Yeah.
But the thing is that a government cannot operate contrary to the will of its people indefinitely.
Yeah.
We will. Sooner or later, hopefully sooner,
Yeah.
some of these countries will see the return of the guillotine.
The problem you run into with that, though, is that you're getting a Muslim majority ethnically. So not only is that an ethnic majority, that is also a voting majority. So
Well, right now it's
There's-
kind of
There's one good thing that's happening with that, though.
Mhm.
White people are bigger than most Muslims. A
Okay.
lot bigger.
Okay.
And I've seen this. I've seen this on videos, and I've seen this firsthand when I go into the Middle East.
right.
I am not a extraordinarily large gentleman.
Right.
I'm bigger than usual, but I'm not bigger than I'm not 6'5", and
Yeah.
I'm not huge.
Yeah.
I'm large, but I'm not massive.
Yeah.
I fucking tower.
Oh yeah.
Over Middle Easterners.
It was the same thing with me in Israel. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm a very average sized guy, but
Yeah.
I was probably it's probably at least a quarter of the density of an average Arab man over there.
Yeah.
Granted, there were some Arabs that were much bigger than I was. Obviously, you're gonna have
Of course, but that's I'm talking about in general.
General, yeah.
Like these fuckers could stand in my shadow and not see a lick of sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
while I was in the army, I was 5'7" and 150 pounds and bigger than every Arab I met.
Yeah.
The thing you run into though is that there's an almost there is a wild mentality with Arabs, and especially with the younger men that I noticed. They do just crazy stuff, in general.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily violent things. They just do crazy stuff, and that you wonder if that.
Well, it's actually interesting. So, the mindset in the Middle East right now, and it always has been primarily tribal.
Yeah.
They are loyal to their own local people first, then to the people of their country, and finally they are loyal to the Ummah, the collective body that is all of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fit anywhere into that.
Right.
We're kafir. We're infidels.
We're them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are.
Well, I'm actually the only infidel here. That's actually true.
Yeah, we're technically people of the book, however, that does not.
We're still
Actually-
very hated.
Muslims still view Christians as infidels because they actually think Christians are polytheists.
What?
Yeah,
because we
the
believe in the
Trinity.
Trinity.
Okay.
yeah. Muslims view that as polytheism.
Sunnis do. The Shia Shia admit that we're people of the book.
But the Shia also include Zoroastrians in that, and they're actually from an entirely separate branch of religions.
Yeah.
But so they're primarily tribal, and in tribal societies, the primary social currency is honor,
Right.
and you gain honor through action.
Yeah.
So Muslim men will do some of the crazy things they do because it nets them. It nets them. They get recognition from their honor group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't care what we think
Right.
because we're outside their honor group. Once again, bring up Jack Donovan. He talks about this in The Way of Men.
Mm-hmm.
That at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the outgroup thinks, as long as you have honor within your own honor group, among your own people.
Well, shoot, we see that even in here,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Like, as far as a lot of things, I really don't care what people think outside of my personal in group, my circle of friends.
Yeah. Right.
But this combines this. There's a weird kind of synergism with Islam here. Islam is inherently militaristic.
Mm-hmm.
It is inherently expansionistic. Warfare and conquest have always been the primary drivers of the spread of Islam. And when you combine that with a highly tribal people who very deeply value honor, it creates an interaction where even above personal honor, they crave honor for their religion, above and beyond everything else.
Right.
There's a book, I forget the name of the fellow who wrote it, but it's called Fistfights with Muslims in Europe. And it's semi-autobiographical about a guy who goes to Europe to kind of get in touch with his own ancestry, and finds it. This is in the early days of the refugee crisis.
Right.
Goes over and finds Sweden, where his family is originally from, overrun.
Mm-hmm.
And so he travels Europe with the idea in his head that the best way to get to know these people is to fight them. And so he literally travels Europe seeking out fistfights. And he points out that one of the big failings we in the West have when it comes to fighting Islamism is that we try to combat Islamism the way we fight wars. We look at them like, okay, what do they want? Do they want more money? Do they want better living conditions? Do they want land?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want any of that. They want more Islam.
Yeah.
We try to make concessions. We try to pay them off, and the only currency they care about is our blood.
Yeah.
Because in the Muslim mind, when Muslims take over a place, they are literally they're not just converting the people; they are converting the land itself to Islam.
Yeah.
The land itself falls in subservience to Allah.
Well, I know.
their sole driver in their movements is Islam. They don't run on standard, Clausewitzian strategy rules.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the standard strategic military targets and things.
Yeah.
They just want to expand.
Yeah. Well, I know what as soon as they put a mosque on a piece of land, they immediately say, okay, this is a Muslim country now. It could just be one mosque, in the entire United States. Oh, okay, you guys have a mosque, you're a Muslim country, so and that's it's a weird declaration of ownership, but
Yeah, it's and it creates a problem where we cannot fight we cannot fight Islamism or even Islam as a whole as though we are fighting some kind of conventional war. The only way to counter them, honestly, and this is going to sound very medieval, but you've got to fight a holy war. You've got you need a crusade.
I run this by you, man, because you see the rapid spread in Islamism, and you see, okay, a case in point where like a lot of Europeans were going to essentially fight for ISIS because they see there's an ideology there. They see people are willing to die for this ideology. Is perhaps the West's failings is that we have given up on our ideologies in general, and our cultures and our.
I think a large part of it is that.
Well, yeah.
I forget who said it, but there's a quote. If you show a boy, a whipped dog and a proud lion, he's going to gravitate toward the lion.
Right. Yeah.
And Islam is a lion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it doesn't give a shit about anything that stands in its way.
Right.
It will trample and devour everything in front of it.
Right.
Because they still value strength. And you look at what's happened to Western values. We don't value masculinity anymore. We're an effeminate society.
Right.
We don't value strength and aggression anymore. We're a pacifistic, very kind of weak society nowadays. Mm-hmm. You go back to the Middle Ages, back in the 11th century when the First Crusade went down. That was a response to 600 years of Muslim aggression.
Right.
You notice they didn't make very many incursions into Europe after that until very recently.
Well, shoot, even
because we stood up and we went, no, we're the fucking lion. You go back to your hole.
Well, shoot, getting on to the, you're talking about masculinity in general. It used to be when two kids had a scuffle in a playground, they'd end up, they get into a fist fight for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And, they'd get home and, maybe they'd get scolded by mom, but it wasn't a big deal.
No,
nowadays,
did you win?
Yeah, or something like that.
Why did you punch him?
Or did you start the fight, or did you finish it? You know, and that was kind of the.
We taught our children to value strength
and
and self-sufficiency.
Right, and we come into a mentality where now it says, "Mom, you come home with a black eye," and Mom says, "Did you get in a fight?"
You're grounding.
Yeah, and that. Number one, I think it has to do with the fact that fathers are not in their houses anymore. Because if you have a strong father who teaches their son an honor code. That's number one.
I was always told as a child, if you get into a fight, if someone attacks you, you bring a level of violence that will guarantee that they will not do it again.
Right.
With all the fights I got into in high school, I only ever fought any given person once.
Yeah. Well, shoot.
Actually,
and it was all my freshman year.
Yeah, I worked with a Mexican fellow actually in my last job. And something I actually admire him for. He was telling me that his youngest son got suspended from school because a guy was picking on this boy. He was taking his school supplies, like taking his pencils off his desk, just pestering this boy. Mm-hmm. This boy played baseball. And he got up and he clocked the kid in the gut with a baseball bat. And told him, after he hit the kid, he told him, "I won't hit you again unless you keep doing this."
Yeah.
His father gave him a raise on his allowance.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Yeah. And that's that mentality of...
Like, a lot of people are like I understand the need for borders.
Mm-hmm.
again, ethno-nationalist.
Yeah.
Mexico was for Mexicans. But they still have an understanding of appropriate levels of force that I think is part of the reason why they are our largest minority group in the U.S.
Well, you take I don't think we should ever teach our sons to be aggressors, but I do think we should teach them to not tolerate violence towards them and towards their family.
I actually disagree with that.
Hmm?
I disagree with that.
Okay.
A man takes what he wants.
To a point. In a modern society, if everybody's taking what they want,
Well, you end up with that Kapistan.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think that these people that are again, I'm Machiavellian. I'm very much in the ends justifies the mean kind of person.
I will point out there that Machiavelli wrote The Prince as
a joke. I know.
Yeah,
I know, but it doesn't change the fact. It doesn't change the amount of it. I'm very the ends justifies the means kind of a person.
Right. The problem you run into with that is that you get into the deal with an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth.
Right.
Leaves the whole world blind and toothless.
Right, and I'm not advocating like physical violence every time. I'm not talking about bullying. I'm talking about
like aggression in a social sense, like
just
exactly being an alpha male type.
Oh yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about physically going after somebody unprovoked is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no.
No, if someone comes up to you and takes something that's yours, like, no, you're not doing that. You know,
I'm not going to take over your business by attacking you.
Right. Yeah.
If I try, you will attack me back.
Right. Absolutely. And and I will say I do believe in a system of treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. However, there does come a point when you say, okay, you're not doing that, I've got to retaliate. And sometimes, and I will admit, sometimes you have to retaliate enough to ensure that they won't do it again. Mm-hmm. At that same time, and I'm mostly talking about physical violence here. I don't think, if a kid comes up and pokes you in the head, I don't necessarily think, you should retaliate to a point that's it's an unnecessary.
Don't kill him.
Yeah, don't kill him. Don't shank him and
or let him know not to do it again.
Right.
To be fair, a kid pulled my hair on the bus once, and I turned around and cracked his jaw with a steel-covered book. It's actually a Bible. I was a neo-pagan at the time, but my father, who I did not live with, sent me a Bible for Christmas, and the first thing I did with it was hit somebody.
well, I mean that's a way to beat someone in the head with a Bible.
That actually reminds me of something. I think we have a problem, and I mentioned earlier that it's essentially going to come down to holy war, because you can't fight Islam with conventional military thought.
Yeah,
and I think to a large degree. Because of that, I think American Protestantism is going to have to kind of step aside a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because American Protestantism has become this kind of like boyfriend Jesus religion.
Yeah, that's one thing. Being Protestant myself, it really disgusts me how tainted and how quaint and trite it's become.
Yeah,
my forefathers came over here and suffered through brutal conditions. Yeah. Just because they wanted to worship and be free to worship God in the way they chose. Yeah. And we turned it into something, you can mess up however many times you want and God still loves you. Well, yeah, that's true. However, if you're truly growing, you're not going to mess up that much.
But we have this...
Well, even beyond the morality...
Well, yeah,
these days, all our worship songs are about how pretty God is, how nice God
right,
is.
I agree.
And you have this thing in
God is the bringer of the sword.
Right.
You have this idea in modern American Protestantism that we should avoid violence at all costs, and if someone strikes you, turn the other cheek.
Well, only when you're dealing. Okay, case in point, and this is where I would differentiate. If you're outside, let's say you are street preaching, okay, and somebody slaps you up the face with that, you know what? Turn the other cheek. I don't think it's a big deal because you're suffering for your religion's sake. However, if they come after your family or if they come after you and they threaten you and either try to take your goods, take your life, whatever, absolutely tear their butt up.
Here's the thing though. And nowadays we interpret turn the other cheek wrong.
Right.
It doesn't mean to turn the other cheek so they can hit that one too. It actually ties back to if you turn. Jews at the time you did everything with your right hand.
Right.
Because, there wasn't toilet paper. It's kind of the same thing in the modern Middle East.
Right.
So if you turn the other cheek, he'd have to hit you with his left hand, which would render him and you unclean.
Right.
So so the idea isn't to, Cowtown. Oh, hit me again, master.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
you steal the moral high ground and you put them in a position where they cannot respond and be right.
Right.
Yeah, you turn the other cheek because if you hit me again, you shame yourself. Do it, I dare you.
Yeah. So the idea is, and for instance, Catholicism doesn't have this idea. In Catholicism, if somebody assaults you, you have an absolute moral obligation to respond with appropriate force.
Right.
If you pull a knife on me, I have a moral obligation to respond with a greater level of force, so that you cannot victimize me or the people I care about.
Right. Well, if you pull a knife on me, sorry, bud, you came to a gunfight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Catholics through the centuries have shown a wonderful willingness to shed blood when it is necessary.
Right.
But we're also the group that invented just war theory and thought about maybe we shouldn't just kill everybody all the time. Which I think is a fundamental difference between Islam and Christianity is that Christianity grew out of its edgy teenager phase. We stopped killing people at a certain point and went, okay, well, it's not always necessary, but these are the times when it is acceptable.
Well, here's the thing.
Islam says, no, kill everyone if they don't convert.
Right. Well, and here's the thing that another thing you run into is you look at the Old Testament when God told Israel, just go in and essentially wipe out everyone because, for various reasons. And I wonder if maybe we haven't... Because I think the pendulum swings back and forth, in any given situation, in any society, be it moral, be it, whatever that ideology is. And I wonder if maybe we haven't swung too far on the side of peace where we just roll over and take whatever comes.
There's a happy medium.
Right, there's a middle ground there that you can walk. And that, I think if you want a functioning society, you need to walk.
Yeah. You need to be peaceful, but also know when it is... You need to have a healthy idea of when it is appropriate to bring violence to the table.
Right. If I can quote...
And the time to bring violence to the table is approaching, if not already here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and if I can quote my mother here, is, she always told me, don't you ever start a fight, but if someone ever starts it on you, you better finish it. You know?
But,
Murray.
Yeah. And this was definitely, there's a fight here that needs to be finished.
Yes.
Yeah. But, it's looking like we're about out of time.
I think we're about done.
Man.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been RightCast Radio. I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me, as always, is
Chatus.
and
Coffee pot.
and
Cobra.
all right, guys. You guys have a good day. Buy local.
Buy local, kill global.